Hello everyone, my name is Dutch Owen. I am the creator and the lead designer for the FSCaptain add-on for Microsoft Flight Simulator, which also runs under Lockheed Martin Prepared version 2. FSCaptain has been out for 5 years now, and we are just getting ready to release version 1.6. We're in the late stages of beta testing, and I thought it would be interesting for current FSCaptain users and anyone who's interested in Flight Simulator and flying more professionally to ride along by my side as we plan and make a typical FSCaptain professional flight. So that's why I'm doing this video today. I hope it'll be helpful to you, and I hope it'll be interesting to you, especially if you're a Flight Simulator fan and want a lot of realism. I want to mention a couple of caveats in this video, just to be clear about things. Number one, this is real. It is not scripted. Mistakes may happen. I quite often make mistakes and try to recover gracefully from them. We're also using Flight Simulator, which has been known to have some quirks and weirdness happen in it. We'll be dealing with that as it comes up. It's fairly rare for it to do something completely stupid, but hopefully we won't see that on our flights today. I kind of have a cold and I'm doing a little wheezing, which you may hear. I hope to avoid sniffling or coughing, but if I do, I apologize in advance. That's a little caveat. The third is this is a two-part video. The first part is planning. That's what we're going to be doing here in a minute. We're going to bring up a screen and do the dispatch planning. That may be a little boring for you. There's not going to be any flying in this video. We're going to be having part 2, which is the actual FSCaptain flight. If you want, you can stop this right about now and go on to part 2 and watch us actually make the flight that we're planning here. And then if you're interested in how that was planned, you can come back and look at part 1. The names on YouTube will be the same. It's just going to be called part 1 and part 2. You don't have to watch all of part 1 before part 2. Very shortly, I want to mention what FSCaptain is. What FSCaptain does is provide a professional aviation environment on top of Flight Simulator and fill in a lot of the gaps to make it a lot more realistic experience for you. Briefly, it provides you an airline to work for. You can choose or create your own airline. It provides you a career in that airline in which you will advance up the ladder if you fly professionally and struggle until you learn to fly professionally. You are not restricted to the aircraft you can fly. You can install FSCaptain and fly any Flight Simulator add-on aircraft you want to. FSCaptain provides a dispatch office for you to interact with. We'll be interacting with that dispatch office as we plan the flight, and we'll be talking to them, and they'll be talking to us during the flight. That's not there to make things more difficult for you. It's there to simulate reality in today's modern world and also to help you out. It's very helpful to have a dispatcher looking over your flight. We provide a flight crew, a first officer, that also is there to help you, not disturb you or get you in trouble. We provide a cabin crew to take care of your passengers because we provide passengers on passenger flights. The passengers are not visually real, of course. That would be too difficult to Flight Simulator, but virtually they are there and they will react to the way you fly, so that if you fly roughly, you will get complaints. If you don't, we'll look out for their comfort back there in the cabin. You will get complaints. That's something new that you may have never considered in Flight Simulator before, managing cabin temperatures and pressures to make sure your passengers are okay. We provide cargo. In addition, many passenger flights also contain cargo. You can fly cargo flights that may or may not contain a few passengers. You're not forced to fly tube liners. You can fly small general aviation up to the largest A380. We also enhance some of the hazards of aviation. Flight Simulator has these hazards, but it doesn't make them very scary. Talking about thunderstorms, icing, and slick runways. FSCaptain enhances all those and provides ways to deal with them, including complete and realistic de-icing procedures at airports. Doesn't look like we're going to be using that today. We have a very clear day here. That's enough talking. Let's jump into the actual planning process. The only thing I want to say before we get started, I'm going to bring up the FSCaptain administrator where we're going to do our flight planning, and we're going to select the tab that says Flight Dispatch. I do want to mention that for our flight today, I'm beta testing the multi-leg capabilities that we've just made some bug fixes to, and trying to make sure we didn't break anything during the bug fixes. So I'm going to be making some multi-leg flights, and there's no better airline than the historical Piedmont Airlines for making short-haul multi-leg flights. The test flight we're going to make today is for Piedmont. I am a Piedmont pilot. I've been flying for them for a couple of years and probably about 350 hours worth, maybe even more. And today we're going to fly from Charlotte, North Carolina to Raleigh, from Raleigh to Richmond, and from Richmond then to Norfolk. There'll be short 20-minute turnaround times at each of these. Fortunately, we have some time to plan all three of those legs now so that we're all ready to go when the time comes and we can meet those short Piedmont turnaround times. We'll be flying in a retrojet, a Boeing 737-200. I'm going to start the planning process now, and I'll talk a little more. We're talking here via computer to our dispatch office and setting up our dispatch plan. The airport we're leaving from is KCLT, Charlotte, North Carolina. We're going to be flying in the MilViz variant add-on of the Boeing 737-200, which is equipped and painted in Piedmont colors, just like a historical Piedmont 737-200. Only today we're going to be flying on December 13th, 2014, assuming that Piedmont survived, kept their schedule intact, and still flying their original airplanes. That's kind of a fantasy, but it's interesting to me, and we can do fantasy scenarios in Flight Simulator. We'll be making a passenger flight today. We could select cargo or ferry type flights. And we're interested in a particular flight leaving from Charlotte on this Saturday, December 13th. So I'm going to list, by clicking on this button, list all the Piedmont flights that are leaving Charlotte today. We can look at the 5 flights that are departing on Saturday, and we can see that the one we are interested in is Flight 12. Flight 12, which I just clicked on the number here, leaves at 3:38 local time in the afternoon, flies to RDU, Raleigh-Durham, 112 nautical miles, estimated 51 minutes for standard conditions, and we are flying 119 passengers up to Raleigh. Many of those probably be staying on board as we turn around in Raleigh and leave and depart for Richmond, Virginia, which is our second stop. And then at Richmond, we will be deboarding some, picking up some more, and flying on to Norfolk, Virginia, where this sequence of flights ends for Piedmont. That'll be quite a bit later on tonight by the time we get there, and then we'll shut down the airplane, and it'll be waiting for tomorrow's sequence of flights. So we're going to plan that. When I say plan, I don't mean do the kind of flight planning you're used to doing, which is laying out routes and altitudes and waypoints and all that kind of stuff. That's already been done for us. Our Piedmont airline already has standard company routes for these various legs. I think we might be missing one from Richmond to Norfolk. We'll see. But we're going to be using those standard plans to do our dispatch planning. So let's get to it. Click on the 12, which is the flight we're interested in, and click the select button. And it brings up the information for the standard layout for that flight. This is leg 1. That's what that 1 means. It is Charlotte to Raleigh, and if we flew directly with no plan at all, we'd be going 68 degrees true heading. I can look at the other legs here. I can press the forward button and look at leg 2, which is Raleigh to Richmond. That would be 35 degrees true. And then our last leg is Richmond to Norfolk, 124 degrees true. We're not going to be really flying those direct true things. We're going to use company plans. So let's go back to leg 1 here, which I've done. And select plan is our first step. I have my plans arranged by departure airport, destination airport, and altitude. So KCLT, KR will bring up our standard company plan, Charlotte to Raleigh at 19,000 feet. So I click on that, open it. And the only acknowledgement that the planner gives is it has changed that 30,000 feet, which is the 737-200 standard planning altitude, to 19,000 feet. So that acknowledges that we have loaded our standard company plan. I use the add-on Active Sky Next. Some people use Rex. There are many add-ons out there. I hate to mention 2 because there are so many others. But at any rate, whatever you use, you can set up the parameters so that FSCaptain will hook into the databases that flight planner uses, and we can retrieve the current weather for our planning purposes. So click on Get Weather, and if you don't get an error message, that means it's gone out and retrieved it out of the database and loaded it into the planning software. It doesn't really tell you it did that, but we can check behind it by clicking on the en route winds. And what we see here is the winds for our particular flight, departing Charlotte, passing the Sandhills VOR, SDZ, passing the RDU VOR, and then landing at Raleigh. We have the approximate altitudes we'll be at over those VORs. We have a wind direction, wind speed, and temperature. All this data came from the current METARs along the route for these various waypoints. So we know we retrieved weather information here. Once we have the weather information, we can do what we're really here to do, which is to come up with a legitimate estimate of what it really will take to fly this flight, as opposed to the standard. The standard plugged into the schedule, which is the printed schedule that is published in the Piedmont offices, is based on an ideal condition of no wind, no traffic, no nothing, just perfect flight conditions. It should take 51 minutes. If we hit this recalculate button, the weather will be factored in, and we'll see what it thinks with current weather. So we'll do that. Hit recalculate, and these numbers change. We see that the 51-minute standard has been reduced to 44, so we can safely assume that the weather is providing us with some nice tailwinds along this route. And this is true because we're flying toward the east, and most of the prevailing winds in North Carolina blow from the west, so we're getting tailwinds, which reduces to 44 minutes block time. Because flight time's reduced, dispatch has helpfully reduced the amount of fuel. This process is kind of a negotiation between you and dispatch office. The dispatch office is fulfilling company policy. They want you to be flying with the minimum safe fuel because it always costs them a little more money for you to be flying with more fuel than you need. They also want to give you the minimum time that they think is reasonable. You, as a captain, however, rule the roost. You actually can override these numbers. That's why these boxes are fillable, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. And I'm going to do that based on my gut feeling and my experience flying this route and many other Piedmont routes. I can tell you that Charlotte is a big airport. It can be crowded this time of day that we're leaving at 3:38 approximately. So therefore, we're liable to get stuck in a long line of taxiing aircraft. We're also liable to run into some ATC problems and get vectored around at Raleigh. So I'm going to add 5 minutes this time, and I'm going to bump our fuel up to 10,000 pounds. That's just gut feeling for me based on my experience. I can give you some guidelines as an FSCaptain planner. If I'm flying a light general aviation aircraft and I'm going between small airports, these estimates are pretty much on target. When I'm flying into a large airport, even though these factor in taxi time, based on the size of the airport, I find that adding some is a little on the safe side because we don't want to be late. If we're late, more than about 5 minutes late in this case, our score will be reduced for being not on time. You may be thinking, well, heck, if that's true, just put an hour in here and we'll never be late. But the problem is there's also an early window. If you're more than, say, twice as much as the late window early, then generally speaking, you will also have your score reduced for getting there too early. So you are compelled as a captain to make a reasonable estimate here for what you get. That'll be compared when you land to what you really did. And if you fall within the parameters, then everything is cool. And if you fall outside the parameters, your score will be reduced. So coming up with accurate estimates for fuel, safety, and estimated time to satisfy the company are very important in the real world and in FSCaptain. We also see some other stuff. It has assigned us to Gate 2, which is a small gate. That's a Piedmont gate at the Raleigh Airport. It knows the gates for Piedmont because I have told it all this information when I set it up. I leave the gate assignment alone. I could change it if I wanted to, but they know where I'm supposed to be parking. It's possible during our flight that this might change. We'll find out if it does. And they've assigned us an alternate airport of Rocky Mount, KRWI. It's standard alternate for Piedmont for Raleigh-Durham. I could change that too, but I'm not going to. What I'm going to do is I've talked a lot about this particular flight and how we did it. We just basically started here and went clockwise around this way until we got what we wanted. I'm going to plan the other two legs, and I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'm just going to do a whole lot less talking. So I'm going to click the forward button and go to leg 2. I'm going to go ahead and select the plan, standard company plan, from Raleigh to Richmond in 17,000 feet. I'm going to fly 17,000 unless air traffic control changes, but for planning purposes, it's going to be 17,000 standard company. Going to get the weather, Check the winds. Yep, we got some weather. We will hit the recalculate button. Once again, it thinks we have tailwinds. It's going to reduce our time. I'm going to tell dispatch, nope, no way. I'm going to add 5 minutes back into this thing and put 10,000 pounds in there. If they wanted to argue with me, they would via error messages and say, no, wait a minute, that's too much fuel. That's too much time. But as long as I'm reasonable, don't add too much of these, they're not going to argue. They'll accept my captain's judgment. I'm going to be parking at gate A3 in Richmond. Our alternate is Newport. We're going to move on to, we've already done that. We've already done that leg. We'll move on to leg 3. Richmond to Norfolk. I'm not sure we have a plan for that, but let's check it out. K-Rick. K-Orf, yes, 11,000 feet. So we will click that plan. We have 11,000 feet. We'll get the weather along that route. Check the winds. Yep, pretty short route, 1 VOR. The reason we're not seeing anything other than VORs is this aircraft is not RNAV equipped. We do not have a glass cockpit. We do not have the ability to fly between intersections. We can only fly over VORs with radio navigation. That's historically accurate, and our flight plans take that into consideration. Recalculate. Once again, we see really optimistic planning purposes here. We're going to add another 5 minutes to that, be on the safe side, and I think I'll bump that up to 9,500 pounds. Gate A1, another alternate, that's all cool. So that plans for dispatch purposes are 3 legs on this flight. We do not have time in our 20 minutes to jump out of our airplane and go do this in between these turnarounds. It's very tight. Piedmont's very aggressive with their turnaround times. So we've all done it in advance. We come back around here to leg 1. We'll show you one more thing, the dispatch release, and we're going to get out of this planning phase and jump into an airplane in video number 2 and start flying. Click on view release here. We haven't committed anything, and we get a copy of what the dispatch release document will look like when it gets handed to us in the airplane cockpit, which we need to sign off on in order to make this flight legally. The important things on here are the fuel calculation, where we see the various phases of flight and how much fuel has been allocated to each one by the dispatch planning software. We see a weight fuel breakdown. It's important to look at the planned tow, that's takeoff weight, to find out how heavy we're going to be taking off. It's going to be about 105,000 pounds, and that's going to influence, it's going to determine what our speed bugs are going to be set in the 737-200. Planned landing weight, that's no big deal. It's all within parameters. We should always look at the weather information. These are current METARs for Charlotte, Raleigh, and our alternate. There is no significant weather, a few clouds, no winds, nothing really bad on any of these 3 METARs. We have a section down here for winds aloft. All this has been factored into the calculations for our ETE, so we can look at it if we want to, but it's no big deal. Right down here is the terminal area forecast for Raleigh, which is the shortest one I think I've ever seen. It basically says from here on out, for the foreseeable future, it's going to be plenty of visibility and not too many clouds. It's going to basically stay the same for a while, which is a good thing for us here in North Carolina. It's a beautiful day this Saturday. It's not even too cold, 14 degrees. We have our flight plan, which we've already planned. It just mentions the various waypoints and gives us some wind speed and directions to let us know how it calculated the final ETE. All that's fairly interesting, but okay. This is kind of fun to look at the manifest. We have 6 units of fixed weight. That's our crew and our flight attendants. We have 119 passengers, which is 20,825 pounds. We're carrying their baggage, almost 3,000 pounds. We're also carrying some mail. A couple of crates of computers. How about that? We're sending some computers from Charlotte to somewhere along the line here, where they'll be and some automobile parts. So we're carrying some cargo along with us. This down here is the detailed load plan. The MilViz has 19 stations. They are crew stations, first class, coach class, the back crew section for the aft crew, and then these G's are cargo sections in the lower part of the aircraft, forward, aft, and pallets. This is how the weight has been distributed by the dispatch planning software to load our aircraft. This is all done automatically, and the load will be done automatically for you by FSCaptain. We have a summary of our weights here, and at the end some remarks. You should always look at the remarks. Sometimes they say very interesting things. These 2 are standard. Transition altitudes, always 18,000 in the U.S., could be different in Europe, will be different in Europe, guaranteed, between destination and departure airports. The arrival window that we already talked about that. We don't want to be more than 5 minutes late based on our estimate of the time taken, and we don't want to be more than 3 minutes early. So we know that. We know we're going to get our score will be enhanced if we get there without making any revisions in flight, and our score will be subtracted from if we get there too early or too late. So we hope our estimate's good, and we hope we don't run into too many problems. So that's our dispatch release. We have done our planning for all 3 legs. I hope that wasn't too boring to you. Certainly if you're an FSCaptain user, you could follow right along. I'm going to commit the flight, and I don't want to forget to do that. Hit the big commit button. It says, do you really want to commit flight 12 Charlotte to Raleigh in a 732? Yes, of course, that's what we're here for, so we click on yes. The screen changes, this goes gray, this lights up, and we could do some more here, but we're not. We're going to end this video. It's already been pretty long. We're going to close that out, take one look at our 732, because that's just a picture. Pretty soon we're going to be in the real sort of simulated thing, and we're going to make our flight in video 2. So close this down, search for video 2 on YouTube, and follow along with me as we load up, take off, fly, land, and hopefully nothing too bad will happen, and we'll make a good score. We'll see. Thank you very much.